Hey guys, welcome to the video. Today I will be showing you guys the best heroic mini Pekka deck in the game. This will help you guys get 12k trophies in no time. I am on a crazy win streak with this deck, and it has some insane defense, and it also capitalizes on the Evo mini Pekka's ability to kill tanks. So, obviously, the Evo mini Pekka is in the pass. So if you don't have the pass, you will not be able to get it. But the Goblinstein is super helpful in this deck, and it can really just destroy Sparky decks. I've seen a lot of Minion Horde, any decks like that. So without further ado, let's get into game number 1. Alright guys, the first matchup is against Classic Logbait, and honestly, I feel like this is a pretty good matchup for the deck, as you do have the Bar Barrel for their Goblin Barrel, as well as multiple splash cards to deal with their gang, and you have Poison for their Princess. This guy is running the Inferno Tower, which is kind of annoying, but we do have the Goblinstein to reset it, and it is definitely not the best to defend our graveyards like a Cannon or Tesla would. So he goes for a Princess. I do kind of like low-key miss the poison here. I did go for the Goblin Cage in the middle to cycle the Evo, because at that point I hadn't known what deck it was. I could have been like Mega Knight bait. So he goes for a Knight behind his tower to defend our Goblin Brawler. We go for our Heroic Mini Pekka, and I do go for a Knight. He does rocket and hit both of them, so we go for the Bar Barrel to just clean up the gang. And honestly, guys, I do feel like the Mini Pekka goes very well in this deck, as it gives it some extra DPS, which it is lacking. And you could swap Evo Goblin Cage out for Evo Cannon, but I do prefer Goblin Cage, just because it does help you deal with those like Mega Knights and Royal Giants. That could be a little bit of an issue because you don't have the greatest DPS. So he goes for a Princess in the back. I just poison it to get some chip damage. I did Ice Wizard his Goblin Barrel just to reduce the amount of damage I took. He goes for a gang. I just Goblinstein in front to tank the whole thing onto the Goblinstein. He does go for an Inferno Tower. And because he just spent 5 elixir on a very defensive card, I just go for a Graveyard, because that 5 elixir he spent, he's not going to be able to use on offense, and he just Knights on top of my Goblinstein to distract him and not let him take out the Inferno Tower, which I don't really know if that was a good play from him, because our blank Graveyard gets a lot of damage. And he goes for a nice Goblin Barrel, and we go for a perfect Bar Barrel to fully clean it up. We go for a poison, probably on the gang that I'm expecting, but he does play it off to the side, and it did miss the Princess. Honestly, guys, I feel like I should have just hit the Princess with that, but it is not that big of a deal. Now, I do end up going for a Knight just to kind of try and pressure this guy a little bit here. I don't go for the Graveyard yet, as I am just trying to bait out a gang, and then I would go for a Graveyard, but as he doesn't gang, I just go for poison on the Princess on the weaker side. And then we go for a nice Goblin Cage Ice Wizard to clean up his Goblin Barrel. We do take like 3 hits, 4 hits. It's not that big of a deal. We go for a Evo Knight to tank these Princesses a little bit, and he does go for a Goblin Gang. I don't use my Bar Barrel because then I wouldn't have anything for his Goblin Barrel. And I just kind of go for a Goblinstein ability to kill all his little swarm. And our Ice Wizard gets a connection, and a poison gets his tower pretty low. We're ahead by 1,400. We go for a Bar Barrel on his Goblin Barrel there, which just cleans it up, and it also defends the gang because of the Barbarian. So now I am setting up with a Heroic Mini Pekka in the back, which allows our Goblinstein to kind of stay in the field as he does rocket that. And now we have a pretty good counter push because of that Goblin Cage. So now we go for a Graveyard and a Poison to try and clip the gang, and we do end up clipping part of the gang, and it does hit the Princess, and it gets the chip damage, and that is game number 1. On to game number 2. Game number 2 here is against a Hog Rider Mega Knight deck, and this is a pretty good matchup for us as we do have the Goblin Cage. I was not expecting him to hog at the bridge that quickly, so I just get a late Goblin Cage, which does full counter the hog, and then he goes for a Flying Machine, so I Goblinstein, and then ability here to take that out. And he is running Dagger Duchess, so our overload of tanks really just depletes his daggers, which lets our knight do a lot of damage here. And Dagger Duchess is a pretty good tower troop to go against with this deck, as you do have quite a bit of tanks, so if you can deplete their daggers, your graveyard is pretty much like your graveyarding a Cannoneer. It is going to be very good for you. He goes for a mini Pekka of his own as we play our mini Pekka to get rid of his Valkyrie. It does die. He goes for minions at the bridge. We go for an Ice Wizard to clean all that up, so the Musketeer gets 0 hits, and the minions only get 1. So now we are up quite a lot of damage here, about 3,000, which is very good for us. We're probably about equal elixir, because I'm assuming he played those minions at 0. So we can probably just win the game from here, play some very good defense, and not let any hogs through. Obviously, is that Mega Knight, but we don't know that yet. So we do just go for an Evo Goblin Cage to take out his Hog Rider. He goes for a Flying Machine. We just end up playing a Goblin Stein to get rid of that as well. Obviously, the ability would not hit it here, so we're just going to have to chip at it with our little guy there, the little scientist. And we just go for an ability to get some tower damage, and that's tower down because he just can't deal with our tanks. He ends up playing a mini Pekka on top of our Doctor there, and we just go for a mini Pekka on the Mega Knight and a Bar Barrel on the Musketeer. He does go for minions, which is not the greatest. We do use our mini Pekka ability to heal some of the HP loss so we can take out that Mega Knight, and then the Evo Knight just tanks all the minions and takes out the Musketeer, and then we go for a Goblin Cage to take out the Hog Rider. We just go ahead and poison the Flying Machine for a full counter, and I don't really want to have to deal with it because, as I said earlier, we don't really have a good counter to air cards with this deck, or at least DPS wise, like we can deal with minions, but it is very hard for us to deal with a Flying Machine. So if you are playing against recruits, just be aware that Flying Machine can definitely be a problem, and removing it is definitely the #1 priority. So he goes for a Evo Mega Knight on our Goblin Stein. I'm just pressuring him in the last 20 seconds of the game, so he can't really go on offense. He does go for a Hog and an Evo Mega Knight, but we just Goblin Cage the Evo Mega Knight, takes it about out, and then we have a bunch of DPS just to take out the Hog. And that is game number 2, on to game number 3. Game number 3 here is against Hog Quake, which I also feel like is a pretty decent matchup for us, as we do have the Hero Mini Pekka to deal with Hog Riders, as well as the Goblin Cage, which is very resilient to Earthquake, as it will still leave the Goblin Brawler unscathed, and it also will, the Evo will pull in the Hog Rider and get a little bit of damage on it before the Earthquake ends up killing it. So he goes for a Mighty Miner in the back, and we just go for a Goblin Stein to kind of render it useless. And then we go for an ability to just DPS down the Musketeer. And the Bar Barrel, even though it did catch that deploy time nerf, it is still very good in graveyard decks to tank for the graveyard, as well as dealing with like Witches, Musketeers, Firecrackers, Dark Goblins. Anyway, he goes for a Hog Rider with some Skeletons, and we just go for an Ice Wizard to clean it up along with the Goblin Cage. As you'll see here, the Goblin does get a hit before the Hog Rider gets a hit, so let's say the Hog Rider was a little bit less HP. It would, in fact, be 0 hits. 10 elixir here, we end up just going for a Goblin Stein in the back, and he does Mighty Miner on top of our card, so he is going to be forced to switch lanes here, and we will just mini Pekka, as it will do a lot of damage to him, and it will offer a pretty big split lane pressure, as that is a level 17 mini Pekka if I pay 1 elixir. And then we do pay 1 elixir, and we get the healing, and we do poison the Skeletons and the cannon. It wasn't really the greatest ability, but it is only 1 elixir, so you can't be punished too hard for using it. We end up just going for a Bar Barrel to try and force out something, ideally a Hog Rider, so we can start getting a counter push. But now it does enter 2x, and he goes for a Mighty Miners, and we just go for a Knight here as well. We are planning on playing a Goblin Stein, and we do play Goblin Stein so that the Doctor goes one way while the big guy goes the opposite way. And then he does try and snipe our Goblin Stein with his Evo Musketeer. He does miss it though, and we end up just poisoning it. And now we have a mini Pekka in that lane, and he really does nothing. I do click the Pancake ability, but it does not end up actually doing it in time before he dies. Would have been nice, though. We go for the cage. As you can see there, the cage part got a hit, and then the Hog Rider went out right on top of the Goblin Brawler, so the Goblin Brawler got a couple hits on it there as well, kind of demonstrating how resilient to Earthquake it is. And then we go for a Graveyard being tanked for by the Goblin, and then we go for a nice poison on top of his Musketeer, and he does Earthquake our Graveyard. So it is very important to go for your graveyards when your opponent does not have Earthquake in hand, or when you just kind of have a pretty big counter push and a big elixir advantage. So we just go ahead and go for a Graveyard here because we have quite a bit of a counter push, and then his Hog Rider, if he does decide to Earthquake the Graveyard, which he doesn't, will end up not having an Earthquake, making it like no threat at all. So either you play offensively with a big counter push, or you kind of just wait to counter push on a Hog Rider. As you can see here, he Hog Riders, goes for the Earthquake, and now we can go for a Knight Graveyard at the bridge because he used his best Graveyard counter. And it does end up getting us quite a bit of damage. He does have to log to reset the skeletons. And then the heroic mini Pekka comes in and takes the tower. That was game number 3. On to game number 4, which is against Giant Sparky with quite a bit of arrows bait in here, as he does have Evo Skarmy as well as Minion Horde. And honestly, I feel like Minion Horde is pretty counterable with this deck as long as you save your counters for it. He goes for a Giant in the back, and I already went for a Knight in the back. So now I just go for a heroic mini Pekka to kind of get those pancakes ticking as he walks to the bridge to fight the Giant. And then we also don't leak elixir. So we go for a cage and then a poison on top of the Minion Horde just to take it out without having to get a little sketchy with a Goblin Sign and an ability. He does go for a mini Pekka and then just uses the ability, which our Goblin still kills them anyway. So it was kind of a waste of 1 elixir on our opponent's part. But now, at 10 elixir, we just go for a Bar Barrel to kind of force out something from him. He goes for Skarmy, and then we just end up going for our Ice Wizard. He then plays a Witch in the back, and I do wish I had Poison here. But we play our other good counter, which is Goblin Stein, as the ability will just rip through the Witch's HP. He goes for a Sparky, and then we end up just going for a Graveyard because that is quite a lot of elixir he spent, and it lets us get a poison down on top of the Sparky, which we need to try and get it lower by the time it crosses the bridge, otherwise it could be hard to deal with. So now we just go for a Evo Cage on his Giant, as well as a Bar Barrel to clean up all the skeletons and tank a Sparky shot, which is very, very nice value from that Bar Barrel. And then our cage gets shot by the Sparky, and our Goblin Brawler walks up to it, tanks a hit, and then that is a counter of the Sparky and the Giant for only 6 elixir, as I did just play a cage and a Bar Barrel. He goes for a Minion Horde at the bridge, and I was already going for a Goblin Sign in the back, so I do have to go for an Ice Wizard in the middle. And this is a pretty good counter push, but he does have that Sparky, so we end up just going Poison on it to do some damage to it. And then he goes for a Giant as well, and we go for the Goblin Sign ability to try and get some damage on that Sparky, which we do end up getting. It is left at 1 HP, but that is not something Bar Barrel can't handle. He goes for a Minion Horde. We already went for a Mini Pekka to do some damage. And then we go for a Goblin Sign ability. And the Cage here comes in nicely to defend the Evo Skarmy, as well as an Ice Wizard just placed on top of it to kill it all. And then he goes for a Mini Pekka. We just go Knight to tank the Witch and the Mini Pekka. We end up going for a Poison on his Sparky that he plays. And then we go for an ability, second ability with this Goblin Stein here. And it will take out that Sparky. And then we have Evo Cage in cycle for his Giant. We go for a nice Ice Wizard to do some damage to that Minion Horde. And we go for an Evo Knight here to get us a bit of a counter push. He goes for a Witch in the back, so I just don't Graveyard, because Graveyarding into a Witch is not a great play. And I'm already up quite a bit of damage. All I need to do here is kind of showcase how great of a defense this deck can have. We do pop our ability of our Mini Pekka to force out a response from him, as all his responses are pretty expensive. And then we go for a Barbell Graveyard to try and force something out as well. We do end up forcing out the Minion Horde, which I'd definitely rather have be in the back than at the bridge, and then we go ahead and poison it. Now we are up quite a lot of damage, and we really haven't let anything hit our towers, so all we gotta do is just keep defending for the last minute in 3x Elixir, really where this deck shines the best actually, so it is pretty much just good game from here, but he is going to prep his biggest push yet, which is a Evo Witch, Evo Sparky Giant deck, or Giant Push, but honestly we've dealt with this before, so we just go for a Cage and an Ice Wizard to kind of just clean up everything, especially his split lane pressure there. And then we go for a Goblinstein just down that lane because it will do a lot of damage to all of his cards and is very good at splash damage. And then we just go for a Poison and then a Evo Cage to take out his Giant. The Sparky is still alive, which is very unfortunate, but we still take it out nonetheless. Then he just goes for a Witch. We just place a Poison on top of it to kill it. And then the defense from here is pretty easy. So that is game number 4. On to the last game of the video. Alright guys, game number 5 here is against Giant Sparky with some bait as well. And he even has Inferno Dragon, so you guys should be able to see how much value Goblinstein gets in this deck. So, the most important thing in this matchup is to not allow minor chip damage. I actually think he's going to minor on my tower, but he does just minor on the Ice Wizard. Probably not the best play for him, but I guess it did kind of trick me, so it does work a little bit. We just go for a Goblinstein so that the Doctor will be able to help clear out the Skarmy, and then the tank will just go opposite lane. He does end up playing his Inferno Dragon. We just poison it because we do not have a great counter in hand for it. But we do just end up going Ice Wizard in the middle to take it out, and then also kind of challenge that princess he has. He does end up going for a minor on top of our Ice Wizard, so we just go ahead and go in for a mini Pekka, as it will charge up his Pancake Bar by hitting it, and then also by taking out the princess. We just go for a nice Bar Barrel on the Goblin Barrel, and then he does Skarmy on top of our mini Pekka. And then we just go for a Knight so we don't have to take as much damage or any damage at all from the Skarmy, because you don't really want to be taking damage. You want to be playing very defensive in 1x Elixir. He goes for a Inferno Dragon, and we just Goblinstein to stun it. He does also have that princess, so we just go Ice Wizard on top to go ahead and take out that princess. Then we go for a nice poison on his Sparky to do a little bit of damage, as you saw last game. And then our Goblinstein will just stun the Sparky, and I go for the ability to kill it, or at least get it very low, so it will just die to our tower. He does go for a Minor and then a Bar Barrel, or a Goblin Barrel, sorry. So we just go for a Bar Barrel on top of it because that Goblin Barrel was obviously tricky, so I knew I could take that and the Minor out with just the mini Pekka. And then we do pop the ability, so it is able to fully take out that Goblin Barrel and provide just a little bit of counter push. So we just go for the nice ability there to damage down that Electro Wizard, and then do some damage to that Sparky, which our Goblinstein will be alive to do a little bit of extra damage to and stun it. Then we go for a nice poison, and we actually hit the general of the Skarmy, so that is very nice. And then, unfortunately, our Cage and the Ice Wizard there do end up dying to the Sparky, but it's not that big of a deal. And then the Inferno Dragon does just die to our Doctor, and we mini Pekka the opposite lane, which creates some pressure because we had to take out that princess one way or another. And then we do end up taking like a couple skeleton hits. It's not that big of a deal. I did use my Bar Barrel on the Sparky to distract it, so we do actually have to just go mini Pekka on the Goblin Barrel, but we should be fine because now we have a pretty big counter push being tanked for by the mini Pekka, and then we just go for poison and the ability. He minors, but it does end up dying, and we get a very, very nice mini Pekka connection, which does a ton of damage. Thank you guys for watching. That's the whole video. Hope you guys use this deck. It is very strong, and it does use the new hero. Have a nice day.